and this is new books for fall 2016 in economics, and there's one book on steam engines. So the first book is New Deal or Raw Deal, How FDR's Economic Legacy Has Damaged America by Folsom. And I was just looking in here, and there's a chapter on what caused the Great Depression, and he lists three things. I thought maybe I'd just list them for some who might be interested. He says that there was negative consequences after the Great War. What was the Great War? Great War was World War One. It was. I actually have a book published in, I think it was 19. Anyways, it was just after World War One, and it only talks about the war because the World War II hadn't happened yet. So I always thought that was really, really neat. But so he lists for three causes of the Great Depression in the 1930s. He lists consequences in the Great War. So there was a big national debt created, and the United States had also loaned, it says, $10 billion to a bunch of European countries. But then some of the European countries stopped paying back the loans. So that was one cause. The second cause is these tariffs that were imposed. And this was part of the reason why some of the European nations stopped paying the loans back. It's called the Smoot-Hawley tariff. And I guess these were pretty nasty tariffs that disrupted a lot of world trade. And then the third cause was the Federal Reserve. Now, the Federal Reserve is what's usually talked about in Austrian economic circles and libertarian circles as withholding the money supply and causing a credit crisis. But anyways, that should be interesting, looking more into that and FDR. So now maybe before I get into the economics books, which mostly came from the Mises Institute, I'll do this one here on the steam engine. It says the most powerful idea in the world by William Rosen. This is a history of the steam engine, and I thought this would be fantastic because this will also talk a little bit about train engines, but also later about maybe coal power plants. If it gets there, maybe not. It doesn't look like it's getting there. It looks like it's going to be talking about England and the wealth of nations, etc. But anyways, I think that'll be interesting. I have been looking for books that talk about a particular commodity. Like I've got a book called Indigo I'm looking forward to getting to. There's a book called Salt that I was going to get, but there were bad reviews about it, so I thought maybe it wasn't worthwhile. It wasn't a very good objective account. And then if you saw my other science video that in this series of fall 2016 new books, I talk about a book called Coal, and it's heavily biased, written by an environmentalist. So anyways, it'd be nice to find more objective books on commodity like coffee, or like, I don't know, the early fromageries in Sweden. Something like that would be interesting. Okay, so now more books on economics, and most of these books, almost all of them, I got from a Mises Institute order that I purchased a couple months ago. So here's a little one called, it says Principles of Economics. This is by Carl Menger, and apparently Carl Menger is the founder of the Austrian School of Economics. And I thought this was like $2 or something, and I thought that would be neat to read some of the early writings. So I've got that little one. Here's a book that I think I actually got from the library sale. I didn't come from the Mises Institute. But one of the authors is associated with the Mises Institute, so it says The Morals of Markets and Related Essays of H.B. Acton. I don't know if he's related to the Lord Acton guy, but anyways, this is edited by David Gordon. I do have, I think, a couple other books by David Gordon. He's, I think, an economic textbook, and then a little book on the philosophy of Austrian economics. A little tiny red book on that. But anyways, I thought it would be interesting to look more at, I actually got from the library recently The Ethics of Liberty by Rothbard, just kind of curious about the moral arguments, because I always think the moral arguments are stronger. You can go through the economic stuff but I don't think that is as persuasive as moral arguments. I think they are appreciated more and are more valued by regular people rather than the technical details of economics. Here's a book by Mises called Bureaucracy, just a plain cover. Just another book on Mises. I do have quite a few of his books now. I haven't yet got to his magnus opus on human action, and apparently it's very difficult to get through. But he wrote, I guess, in I want to say the early 20th century, and basically some of his work was influential to F.A. Hayek, and I've got some of his stuff coming up. So here's one, for example. He edited this. It says Capitalism and Historians. So it's got a bunch of people in it, including F.A. Hayek, and then he also compiled this. He was the editor. I recently read, and I think this is what this book talks about. I think it talks about kind of the distortions that historians make when they talk about capitalism, and they talk about child labor, and they talk about the Industrial Revolution was so awful, and all that's just bias, and usually by Marxist type historians, which were pretty pervasive in the early 20th century and mid 20th century, especially as they fled Europe and fled Russia and came to England and the United States. But anyways, this is probably about almost a year ago. I read a book by Mises called The Anti-Capitalist Mentality. It's actually not very long. It's probably 50 or 60 pages. And that talks about the same type of ideas, the anti-capitalist mentality, why people have this mentality. So this will be something related, except talking about academic historians and why they bias the account of the history of capitalism, stuff like that. This book I've been actually reading. I don't know, maybe a tenth of the way in, but it's actually quite nice. It's a history of economics. Talks about big thinkers. So it says the making of modern economics, lives and ideas of great thinkers. And I think it was into Adam Smith or something at the moment, or I'm not sure where I was at, but so far it's been quite good. So that one is by Mark Skousen. All right, now these last two are definitely from the Mises Institute. This one I think was $7, I think. The Case for Discrimination by Walter Block. So you might know, I think this is a bunch of his early essays, but it's just a brand new book and they were getting rid of them. So I think this is a bunch of some of his essays. But I imagine that this led to eventually his writing of Defending the Undefendable. And that's when he talks about that various things like, blackmail and prostitution maybe, and a bunch of other things that we think are detestable, and think that we need a government to libel, and that we need a government to step in and protect us from, that he actually argues that no, the market will take care of it, which seems radical, but okay, we'll make the case. I'm curious to know. So anyways, that'll be somewhat part of that, the case of discrimination. For example, there's this interesting case of the freedom of association, and whether, for example, you had a store and you had certain beliefs. Let's make up something weird, like you don't want anyone with red hair, they're not allowed to shop there. And so I come in the store and they tell me that, yeah, look, we think that people with red hair are devils and we can't serve you and you need to go. A libertarian case would say that that's acceptable because freedom of association, and you can't force people to deal with each other or do business with each other. If arranged marriages are wrong, then why can't arranged business relationships be wrong? So that case is made in Walter Block, The Case for Discrimination. He suggests that that is a freedom of association, and the one example that got the libertarians going crazy was what's sometimes is referred to as the Nazi birthday cake or something like that, or wedding cake. The Nazi wedding cake, because the issue was And this happened in the States. There was what was it called, the pizza? It was something about pizza, though. It wasn't a cake, but it was something about like these religious business owners were refusing to serve a gay couple to cater pizza to their wedding or something like that. And I don't actually know what the result was. I don't know if they got shut down or what, but in the libertarian case, there was it was a similar thing, but except it was a cake, and it was something like, does a Jewish bakery have to make a cake for a Nazi party or something, a Nazi birthday party or something like that? And the leader of the Libertarian Party in the States, Gary Johnson, said yes, but that seems like it's not libertarian, but that seems like it's more of a populist answer, and Gary Johnson at the time was probably trying to make a go of the election in the States, and he had a very good chance, especially with the other candidates that were being offered. But so he took a populist stance, because most people would say, well, that's a weird situation, but you should have to serve people. Usually, the average person will usually just say that they don't. The average person often has a poor view of business people, even if they're small business people, which is an interesting phenomenon. But anyways, they'll tend to side with the customers rather than the business, even if the business is just a mom and pop store. It's not a giant corporation like McDonald's or something. And they'll just say, well, you have to side with the customer. And if the customer wants a cake, it doesn't matter what they are. It doesn't matter if they're displeasing to the business. The business has to serve them. But the libertarian answer is that it's a free country, freedom of association rules. If you don't want to serve someone, it doesn't matter why. If you don't want to serve someone, then don't, and tell them to get out. Now, there are consequences to that, right? If you're a racist, for example, and you only want to serve only want to serve Asians, let's say, in your Asian restaurant, word's going to get around, and you're going to get flack for that. You might get protests outside your store. You might get letters to the editor in the newspaper. People like that receive flack. Now, what the libertarians say is that is the appropriate response to people doing shitty things, is public outrage, not government laws. So, anyways, let me get to the last book here. This is actually the main book I wanted to get out of the Mises order, but I looked through the store and I bought a bunch of other random stuff that was fairly cheap, like the Carl Menger book, was $2, and that Bureaucracy book was $1. And I think the Block book, was $7. All this stuff was 50% off. So the Walter Block book, I think, was normally $14, and it was $7. This was all U.S. money, though, so Canadian money at about 25% right now. Our Canadian funny money. I'm not sure. I thought there was maybe 2 other books that I got, but I don't know what they are. They must be in some of the other piles. But anyways, this is the main reason that I wanted to order. I think this book was $30, but then 50% off. I think my total order was $30, so however the math works out. But this is the main book I wanted to get. This is by Robert Murphy, and it's supposed to be a very good textbook on economics, so lessons for the young economist. And I flipped through it, and it looks fantastic, and it's something that I want to get to. He's part of the Mises Institute, I guess, but he's more like an associate, and I think he has his own private practice or something. I think he has a PhD. But anyways, I'm almost finished with Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics, about 3/4 of the way through. And Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics has no tables, no graphs, no charts. There is actually 2 tables that I found as I'm going through it, but there's no graphs that you normally, there's no calculations, there's no formula that they're normally all over economics textbooks. So it's very math heavy, right? Often very math heavy. But his hasn't been. His has been written for the public, for the public to get something out of it. And I'm getting lots out of it. So once I'm finished that, I want to go to Robert Murphy's textbook and keep going, because it's been great. And studying, you don't have to take courses and stuff at universities and pay $500, $600, $700 a course. You can pick up, yes, it's going to be a big textbook. It's going to be something with 600 pages in it, or it'll be a bigger sized book like this, and it'll be 400 to 300 pages. But you can take a course that maybe it takes you 6 months to do. Maybe you read 5 pages or so a week. Yeah, you'll get through the book, and you can essentially take courses as if you were sitting in these classes, but just by reading these books. And there are no exercises or questions that are in the Solve book, but there probably will be in this Murphy book. So I encourage people to, you're just because you've got your degree and you've got your college degree, or maybe you don't have a college degree, doesn't mean that you stopped reading and stopped figuring stuff out. So anyways, that's been my new books for fall of 2016.